The morning sun peeked through the tattered curtains of the small apartment, casting a soft glow over the cluttered kitchen. Lisa sat at the wobbly wooden table, her small frame hunched over a battered notebook. She was only 10, but her brown eyes carried a depth far beyond her years, eyes that had learned to navigate chaos with quiet resilience. Her unkempt hair tumbled over her shoulders, framing a face etched with quiet determination. With each stroke of her pencil, she attacked the math problem before her as if it were a key to a secret door, a door that led far away from the life she knew. The kitchen was quiet, save for the faint scratch of graphite on paper. Lisa muttered numbers under her breath, her voice a gentle hum of focus. She wasn't just solving problems. She was building a future, one equation at a time. Suddenly, the fragile piece shattered. The front door slammed with the force of a storm, followed by her father's angry voice. "You always have to have the last word, don't you?" He roared, his frustration spilling into the room like a tidal wave. Lisa's mother fired back, her voice sharp and tired. "Maybe if you listened for once instead of running your mouth, we wouldn't be in this mess." The argument unfolded like a well-rehearsed play, one Lisa had seen countless times before. She gripped her pencil tighter, trying to focus on the numbers in front of her. Each number was a refuge, a safe haven where logic ruled and chaos couldn't penetrate. "Lisa, go to your room," her mother yelled suddenly, her voice cutting through Lisa's fragile bubble of concentration. Lisa hesitated, her eyes flickering between the notebook and her mother. "But I'm almost done," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the shouting. "Now, Lisa," her father barked, his face lined with exhaustion. Without another word, Lisa closed her notebook and stood, her head bowed as though carrying an invisible weight. She climbed the stairs to her small room, a space that had become her sanctuary. The walls, once painted a cheerful blue, had faded to a dull grayish hue. A narrow window let in just enough light to illuminate the makeshift bookshelf stuffed with worn paperbacks. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, Lisa reopened her notebook. The world outside her door raged on, but in her room, she found solace in the certainty of mathematics. Numbers didn't argue or disappoint. They followed rules and delivered solutions. Her voice barely above a whisper, she murmured to herself, "One day, this will all change. I'll make sure of it." The classroom buzzed with the hum of voices as students settled into their seats. Lisa walked in quietly, her notebook clutched tightly to her chest, like a shield. The second row, near the window, was her usual spot, close enough to follow the lesson but far enough from the chatter of her classmates. For Lisa, school wasn't just a place to learn. It was a sanctuary where the chaos of home couldn't reach her. The bell rang, and the room fell silent as Miss Judith strode in, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. She carried an air of authority that silenced even the rowdiest students. Her tall frame and stern expression were legendary. Even the bravest among her students dared not cross her. "Good morning, class," Miss Judith began, her voice crisp and measured. "Today, we'll be diving into advanced algebra." Lisa's heart quickened. Advanced algebra, her favorite. She opened her notebook, her pencil poised, ready to capture every word. Numbers and equations were like a second language to her, one she spoke fluently. Miss Judith turned to the board, her chalk gliding across the surface as she explained the intricacies of the day's lesson. Lisa followed every line, every symbol, her mind piecing together the puzzle like an artist blending colors on a canvas. But as Miss Judith wrote out a particularly complex equation, Lisa's brow furrowed. Something wasn't right. Lisa hesitated, her pencil hovering over the page. Should she speak up? Miss Judith wasn't known for tolerating interruptions, but the error gnawed at her, a misplaced variable that threw off the entire calculation. Gathering her courage, Lisa raised her hand. "Excuse me, Miss Judith," she said softly. "I think there might be a mistake. Shouldn't the variable be in the numerator instead of the denominator?" The room fell into a stunned silence. 20 pairs of eyes turned to Lisa, and the air grew thick with tension. Miss Judith froze mid-sentence, her hand still holding the chalk. Slowly, she turned to face Lisa, her sharp gaze locking onto the girl. "You think I made a mistake?" Miss Judith's tone was icy, laced with disbelief and irritation. Lisa swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just thought it might be wrong." A flicker of annoyance crossed Miss Judith's face. She crossed her arms, her expression unyielding. "Let me remind you, Lisa, that I am the teacher, and you are the student. My job is to teach, and your job is to learn. If I were wrong, which I'm not, it wouldn't be your place to correct me." Lisa's cheeks burned, but she held her gaze steady. She hadn't meant to challenge Miss Judith, only to help. The silence in the room was deafening, the weight of the teacher's words pressing down on her. Slowly, Lisa lowered her hand and returned her focus to her notebook, pretending to take notes as her mind raced. Miss Judith continued her lecture, her voice sharper now, but Lisa couldn't shake the knot in her stomach. She had always admired Miss Judith's intelligence and precision, but the harsh reaction left her questioning her place. For the first time, Lisa felt as though her gift for math was less a blessing and more a burden. When the lesson ended, the other students filed out, their chatter returning in quiet murmurs. Lisa lingered, her head bowed as she packed her things. Miss Judith remained at the board, erasing the equations with quick, sharp movements, avoiding Lisa's gaze. For a moment, Lisa considered apologizing, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she slipped out of the classroom, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The challenge. The following day, Lisa entered the classroom with her notebook pressed tightly to her chest. Her steps were slower than usual, her heart heavy with doubt. She replayed yesterday's confrontation with Miss Judith in her mind, each word of reproach echoing like a drumbeat. She couldn't understand why her honesty had been met with such hostility. All she'd wanted was to help. As the other students trickled in, the room filled with the usual hum of chatter, but Lisa stayed silent, taking her seat by the window. Her eyes drifted to the board, where Miss Judith had begun preparing the day's lesson. Something was different about the teacher today. Her movements seemed less confident, her shoulders slightly hunched. For a woman who always commanded the room, it was an unusual sight. The lesson began as usual, with Miss Judith's sharp, methodical explanations. Lisa followed along, her pencil flying across the page, her mind locking onto the patterns in the equations. But then, once again, she spotted a mistake. A small oversight in the formula Miss Judith had written on the board. Lisa's chest tightened. She hesitated, the memory of yesterday's reprimand still fresh. But Lisa's sense of logic was stronger than her fear. She raised her hand cautiously. "Miss Judith," she said softly, her voice steady but measured, "I think the denominator might need simplifying before moving forward." The room went silent again, all eyes darting between Lisa and the teacher. Miss Judith paused, her hand hovering over the chalkboard. This time, her expression was unreadable, a mixture of surprise and something Lisa couldn't quite place. Slowly, the teacher set down the chalk and turned to face her. "So," Miss Judith said, her voice colder than before, "you've decided to correct me again." There was no mistaking the edge of challenge in her tone. "Fine. Let's see just how much you think you know." She walked to the far corner of the board and began writing an equation, a monster of a problem, filled with intricate variables, exponents, and multiple layers of complexity. The chalk squeaked as she worked, her movements brisk and deliberate. By the time she finished, the equation sprawled across the board like a mathematical labyrinth. "Here," Miss Judith said, stepping aside. "Solve this. If you're as brilliant as you think, this shouldn't be a problem." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. The other students exchanged glances, some excited to see Lisa fail, others quietly rooting for her. Lisa stared at the equation, her throat tightening. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, far beyond the scope of their grade level. She hesitated, the weight of Miss Judith's challenge bearing down on her. But then, she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and stood. She walked to the front of the room, her steps steady but her heart racing. The chalk felt cool and fragile in her fingers as minutes passed, though to Lisa it felt like hours. Finally, she set down the chalk and stepped back, her hands trembling slightly. "It's done," she said simply, her voice calm but firm. Miss Judith approached the board, her eyes scanning Lisa's solution. Her expression didn't change as she moved from line to line, checking each step with meticulous care. The classroom was so quiet that the faint squeak of her shoes against the tile echoed loudly. When she reached the final line of Lisa's work, Miss Judith froze. Lisa had solved the equation perfectly. The room erupted in whispers and muffled gasps. A few students clapped hesitantly, their admiration evident. Lisa returned to her seat without a word, her face calm but her heart pounding in her chest. Miss Judith turned to face the class, her features unreadable. For a moment, she simply stood there, as if weighing her next words. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she spoke. "That was correct," she said slowly, her voice softer than anyone had ever heard. "Completely correct." The class stared at her in stunned silence. Miss Judith had never been one to admit mistakes or praise a student so openly. But there it was, an acknowledgement of Lisa's brilliance. After the lesson, when the bell rang, Lisa stayed behind, packing her things slowly. She had no intention of lingering, but something made her pause when she heard Miss Judith's voice. "Lisa," the teacher called, her tone gentler now. "May I have a word with you?" Lisa looked up, her brown eyes wary. She nodded and approached Miss Judith's desk. For the first time, the teacher's stern demeanor seemed to waver. She sat down, gesturing for Lisa to do the same. "Lisa," Miss Judith began, folding her hands on the desk, "I owe you an apology. I was unfair to you. Yesterday, and again today, I let my pride cloud my judgment." Lisa blinked, unsure how to respond. She had never seen Miss Judith like this. Vulnerable, almost human. "You have a gift," Miss Judith continued, her voice steady, but tinged with something softer. "A remarkable mind. And I think I was intimidated by that. It's not often I encounter a student who challenges me." Lisa's heart softened at the words, though she didn't know what to say. Finally, she spoke. "I wasn't trying to challenge you, Miss Judith. I love math. And when I see something wrong, I can't help but want to fix it." Miss Judith smiled faintly, a rare sight that softened her sharp features. "And that is exactly why you're extraordinary, Lisa. But let me ask you, what are you planning to do with that brilliance of yours?" Lisa hesitated, then lowered her gaze. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know I want to be better. To get out of everything." Miss Judith's eyes softened with understanding. She leaned forward, her voice firm but kind. "Then let me help you. There's a mathematics competition coming up, a national event. It's a chance for you to shine, Lisa, to show the world what you're capable of." Lisa's eyes widened. "A competition?" "Yes," Miss Judith said, her tone growing more confident. "It won't be easy. But with your talent and determination, I know you can do it, and I'll be here to guide you every step of the way." For the first time in days, Lisa felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. She nodded, a small but genuine smile spreading across her face. "I'll do it," she said. "Thank you, Miss Judith." And in that moment, a partnership was born, not just of teacher and student, but of two people united by a shared belief in the power of potential. The training. The days leading up to the mathematics competition were unlike any Lisa had ever experienced. Her life, which had once revolved around the small worn notebook she carried everywhere, now expanded into something bigger, brighter. Miss Judith transformed from a stern figure looming at the front of the classroom into a mentor who guided Lisa with precision and care. After school, the two of them spent hours poring over textbooks and practice problems. The math classroom became their training ground, the whiteboard covered in layers of equations, graphs, and formulas. Miss Judith, no longer the imperious figure she once was, approached each session with a newfound energy, her voice carrying encouragement instead of command. Lisa, for her part, soaked up every lesson like a sponge. For the first time, she felt what it was like to have someone believe in her, not just in her intelligence, but in her ability to rise above her circumstances. The competition wasn't just an opportunity to prove herself academically. It was a chance to take her first step toward a future she could barely dare to imagine. Pushing limits. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the classroom in shades of amber, Lisa stared at the board, her brow furrowed. Miss Judith had written an advanced calculus problem that seemed impossibly complex. Lisa bit her lip, the weight of frustration pressing down on her. "I don't know if I can do this," she muttered, setting the chalk down. Miss Judith, standing beside her, crossed her arms and studied the equation. "You've done harder problems before, Lisa," she said gently. "What's really bothering you?" Lisa hesitated, her gaze fixed on the floor. "What if I fail? What if I'm not as good as you think I am?" Her voice wavered, betraying the insecurity she had tried so hard to suppress. Miss Judith's expression softened. She stepped closer and placed a hand on Lisa's shoulder, her voice firm but kind. "Lisa, failure is part of learning, but you won't fail, not because I believe in you, but because you believe in yourself. That's what matters most." Lisa looked up, her eyes meeting Miss Judith's. For a moment, the room was silent, the air heavy with unspoken understanding. Then, with a deep breath, Lisa picked up the chalk again. This time, her hand moved with more confidence, each line drawn with purpose. Step by step, the problem unraveled under her careful work until the solution emerged. "See," Miss Judith said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You just needed to trust yourself." Lisa's grin was small but genuine. "Thanks," she said quietly, feeling a flicker of pride. Breaking the barrier. At home, Lisa's parents began to notice the change in her. Though the arguments didn't stop, Lisa's presence at the kitchen table, hunched over her books, seemed to act as a buffer. Her mother watched her one evening, a mix of guilt and admiration in her eyes. "You're really serious about this competition, aren't you?" her mother asked, breaking the silence. Lisa looked up, surprised. She nodded. "It's important. If I do well, it could open doors for me." Her mother hesitated, then sat down across from her. "I'm proud of you, you know. I can't say it enough. But I am." The words, though unexpected, filled Lisa with warmth. "Thanks, Mom," she said softly, her voice barely audible. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of connection with her mother, a small step forward in the midst of their fractured relationship. The competition day. The day of the competition arrived in a blur of nerves and excitement. The venue was a sprawling auditorium filled with students from all over the region. Lisa clutched her worn notebook tightly as she entered, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. The scale of it all was overwhelming. Miss Judith walked beside her, a steadying presence. "Remember," she said, her voice calm, "this is just another set of problems. Treat it like you would in the classroom. Focus on the math, not the noise." Lisa nodded, her heart pounding. She took her seat at one of the numbered desks, the test papers placed neatly in front of her. The timer began, and the room fell into a concentrated silence. Each question presented a new challenge, a new opportunity to prove her skills. Lisa's pencil moved quickly, her mind racing to keep up with the complexities before her. There were moments when doubt crept in, but she pushed it aside, focusing on what she knew to be true. Every problem had a solution, and she had the tools to find it. A moment of victory. Hours later, the competition ended, and Lisa emerged from the testing room exhausted but hopeful. She found Miss Judith waiting in the hallway, her face lighting up when she saw Lisa. "How do you feel?" Miss Judith asked. "I think I did okay," Lisa said with a small smile, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. The awards ceremony began soon after, and the tension in the room was palpable. Names were called, trophies handed out, but Lisa barely heard any of it. Her mind was too busy replaying the problems she had solved, wondering if she had done enough. "And the first place goes to," the announcer said, pausing dramatically, "Lisa Smith." The room erupted in applause, but Lisa sat frozen in her seat, unable to believe what she'd just heard. Miss Judith nudged her gently. "That's you," she whispered, her voice thick with pride. Lisa stood on shaky legs and made her way to the stage. As she accepted the trophy, her eyes scanned the audience until they landed on Miss Judith, who was clapping with tears in her eyes. For the first time, Lisa felt the full weight of what she had accomplished, not just the competition, but the journey that had brought her here, the future. On the way home, Lisa and Miss Judith sat side by side on the bus, the trophy resting between them. The weight of it felt less important than what it symbolized: possibility. "You've done something incredible today, Lisa," Miss Judith said. "But this is just the beginning. The doors that are opening for you now, they'll take you anywhere you want to go." Lisa nodded, her heart swelling with hope. "I'm ready," she said simply. And for the first time, she truly believed it. The ripple effect. The weeks after the competition were a whirlwind of change. Lisa's victory wasn't just a personal triumph. It sent ripples through her school, her home, and even the larger community. Her name became synonymous with potential, her story a beacon for anyone who doubted the power of perseverance. At school, Lisa walked through the hallways with her head held high. Gone were the days when she was overlooked or underestimated. Her classmates, who once whispered about her in hushed tones, now approached her with admiration. They asked for help with homework, listened more intently when she spoke in class, and celebrated her success as if it were their own. But Lisa hadn't let the attention inflate her ego. She remained the same quiet, determined girl who carried her battered notebook everywhere. The only difference was the lightness in her step, the quiet confidence that now radiated from her. A teacher's transformation. Miss Judith was no longer the intimidating, unapproachable figure she had once been. Something had shifted in her after the competition, an awareness of the power of nurturing talent, of lifting others instead of asserting control. She had always prided herself on her discipline and knowledge, but Lisa had shown her that teaching was about more than just imparting information. It was about connection, empathy, and the courage to admit when one could do better. One day after class, Miss Judith called Lisa to her desk. "Lisa," she began, her tone warm, "I've been thinking. Your victory at the competition wasn't just about you. It's about what you've shown others. I think it's time we started something bigger here." Lisa tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" Miss Judith leaned forward, her hands clasped on the desk. "A math club. A place where students who love solving problems, or even those who think they can't, can come together to learn, grow, and push themselves. You could help me lead it." Lisa's eyes widened. "Me? Lead it? Why not?" Miss Judith smiled. "You've already proven that you're capable of more than anyone imagined, including me. This could be your chance to share what you've learned, to inspire others the way you've inspired me." The idea took root in Lisa's mind. The thought of helping others discover the joy and power of math felt right. "I'd love that," she said, her voice steady with determination. A shift at home. At home, Lisa's victory had sparked something unexpected. Her parents, who had once filled the house with arguments, now found themselves united in pride for their daughter. The trophy sat on the mantel, its polished surface reflecting the newfound calm in their lives. One evening, as Lisa worked through a set of new problems in her room, her father knocked on the door. He entered hesitantly, his usual gruff demeanor softened. "I just wanted to say." He paused, struggling to find the words. "I'm proud of you, kid. What you did. It's more than I ever thought was possible." Lisa looked up, surprised. Her father had never been one for open expressions of emotion. "Thanks, Dad," she said softly. He lingered for a moment, then added, "And I'm sorry." for the yelling, for not paying attention. You deserve better than that. Lisa felt a lump form in her throat. It's okay, she said, though they both knew it wasn't. Still, the apology was a step forward, a crack in the wall that had long divided them. Building something new. The math club quickly became the heart of the school. Students from all grades gathered in the classroom after hours, their laughter and discussions filling the once quiet space. Lisa, though shy at first, found her voice as a mentor. She showed them not just how to solve equations, but how to approach problems with curiosity and resilience. Miss Judith watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. The club wasn't just a place for learning. It was a place for connection, a community where students felt seen and valued. One afternoon, as Lisa explained a particularly tricky concept to a group of younger students, a boy raised his hand. "Lisa," he said, "how did you get so good at this?" Lisa paused, considering the question. "It's not about being good," she said finally. "It's about trying, about not giving up, even when it feels impossible. That's where the real learning happens." The boy nodded, his eyes shining with understanding. And in that moment, Lisa knew she was making a difference, a vision for the future. As the months turned into years, Lisa's achievements continued to grow. She entered more competitions, each one a new challenge, and earned a reputation as a rising star in the world of mathematics. Scholarships and opportunities began to pour in, offering her a path she had once only dreamed of. But Lisa never forgot where she came from. She continued to nurture the math club, mentoring younger students and encouraging them to chase their own dreams. She worked with Miss Judith to organize school-wide math fairs and workshops, turning what was once a solitary pursuit into a collective celebration of learning. At home, the changes were just as profound. Her parents, inspired by Lisa's determination, began to rebuild their relationship. The arguments didn't disappear overnight, but they became less frequent, replaced by moments of quiet understanding and support. The legacy begins. On the day of her high school graduation, Lisa stood at the podium as the valedictorian, her heart pounding as she looked out at the audience. Her parents sat in the front row, their faces filled with pride, while Miss Judith stood to the side, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. Lisa took a deep breath. "When I was 10 years old," she began, her voice steady, "I thought the world was made up of problems without solutions. But I've learned that even the hardest problems can be solved, with time, effort, and the right people by your side." Her eyes flicked to Miss Judith, who nodded slightly, her own eyes glistening. "This isn't just my success," Lisa continued. "It's the success of everyone who believed in me, even when I doubted myself. And it's a reminder that no matter where you come from, you can always find a way forward." The audience erupted into applause, but Lisa's gaze remained on the people who had shaped her journey. In that moment, she felt not just the weight of her achievements, but the boundless potential of what lay ahead. The power of belief. Years passed, and Lisa's life transformed in ways she had once only dreamed about. She went on to attend one of the most prestigious universities on a full scholarship, majoring in mathematics with a minor in education. Her passion for numbers remained as strong as ever, but alongside it grew a deeper purpose, a commitment to help others find their own paths to success, just as Miss Judith had helped her. Coming full circle, after completing her studies, Lisa returned to her hometown, not out of obligation, but with a sense of purpose. She became a teacher at the very school where her journey had begun. Walking into the classroom for the first time as an educator, she felt a rush of memories. The rows of desks, the chatter of students, the quiet hum of curiosity in the air. It was a full circle moment, but now she was on the other side of the desk. Miss Judith had retired by then, but her legacy remained in the walls of the school, in the math club Lisa had helped build, and in the lives of countless students she had inspired. Lisa often thought of her, her stern demeanor softened over time, her wisdom shaping the person Lisa had become. It was a reminder that even flawed beginnings could lead to transformative ends. Planting new seeds. One afternoon, while teaching a group of 7th graders, Lisa noticed a boy in the back of the room, his hand hovering hesitantly over his desk. His name was Jacob, a quiet student who rarely spoke, but whose eyes lit up whenever a math problem clicked for him. "Jacob," Lisa said gently, "do you have a question?" He shook his head at first, but then, emboldened by her patience, he said, I think the equation on the board might have an extra step we don't need." The room grew quiet as everyone turned to Lisa, waiting for her reaction. She smiled, the memory of her own childhood self flashing in her mind. "Why don't you come up and show us what you're thinking?" Jacob hesitated but eventually stood, his movements tentative as he approached the board. With careful strokes, he explained his reasoning. When he finished, Lisa nodded, her voice filled with encouragement. "That's excellent work, Jacob," she said. "You just saved the whole class a step. Great observation." The boy beamed as he returned to his seat, his confidence visibly growing. It was a small moment, but for Lisa, it symbolized something much larger. It was proof that the cycle of belief and encouragement was continuing, that her journey was now empowering others to begin their own. A lesson for life. That evening, Lisa sat in her small apartment, grading papers and reflecting on the path her life had taken. She thought of her parents, who had learned to find peace and pride in their daughter's accomplishments. She thought of Miss Judith, whose courage to admit her mistakes had paved the way for a relationship that changed both their lives. And she thought of her younger self, sitting at the kitchen table all those years ago, gripping a pencil like it was a lifeline. Lisa realized that her story wasn't just about her. It was about the people who had shaped her, the obstacles that had tested her, and the lessons she had learned along the way. The greatest lesson of all, she knew, was the power of belief, not just belief in oneself, but belief in others. Miss Judith had seen something in Lisa that she hadn't yet seen in herself. That belief had sparked a fire that carried Lisa through the darkest moments of her life and propelled her toward a brighter future. And now, Lisa was doing the same for her students. She understood that every child who walked through her classroom door carried their own struggles, their own fears, their own dreams. It was her job to see their potential, to nurture it, and to remind them that they were capable of greatness. The lasting impact. Years later, Lisa stood in the audience at a graduation ceremony, not as a student, but as a mentor. Jacob, the quiet boy who had once doubted himself, was delivering the valedictorian speech. His words carried the same conviction and hope that Lisa herself had once spoken with. "Someone once told me," Jacob said, his voice steady, "that failure is just another step toward learning, and that belief, in yourself and in others, can change everything. Because of that belief, I'm standing here today." Lisa felt a lump in her throat as she listened. She clapped alongside the crowd, but in her heart, she knew that moments like these were the true measure of her success. A life of meaning. Lisa's story didn't end with trophies or accolades. It continued in the lives she touched, the students she inspired, and the belief she passed on. Her journey was proof that brilliance isn't just about solving problems. It's about resilience, compassion, and the courage to create a better future, not just for yourself, but for those around you. And as Lisa walked out of the auditorium that evening, the stars shining brightly above, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not for the destination she had reached, but for the journey that had shaped her. The lesson she carried with her, and the one she would teach for the rest of her life, was simple yet profound. The greatest gift you can give anyone is to believe in their potential, even when they can't see it themselves. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.